All right, welcome back to the Equipped Bruised Tired podcast. With me, as always, is Bryce Krawchuk.
Hello.
And yeah, it's been another good week and another good interview we'll get to in a few minutes here. But how's things over in Calgary town?
Good, man. Finished up the block, hit some all-time PRs.
Yeah, we saw that.
On bench, like a substantial all-time PR. I think it was 14.5 kilos over anything that I had benched previous to this block. So I hit my 200 kilo bench. It was probably at 9. One of my pecs has been giving me a little bit of guff since all of my training loads have just like gone up 10 kilos across the board this block. So I decided not to push it, and then kind of like felt something pull just a little bit in my left pec on my back down work anyways. So
Right.
I'm glad I didn't go any heavier, and that's, I mean, already feeling better by now. So, and yeah, hit my first all-time squat PR in 5 years. All-time raw squat PR in 5 years. Right. So, yeah, squatted 700 pounds for the first time. I think depth was there-ish. It looked okay to me.
3 weight lights for me. You know my
yeah.
motto.
Yeah, I was happy with it, man. And then pulled 360 for a double. Decided not to go any more aggressive than that after taking a huge jump the week before, and how beat up I was feeling after squats. Like, I hit my top single, did 1 rep of my back off work, and my hip was like, whoa. So I just like left it for a few days, but I was able to pause squat and everything. So it's not like I set myself back. It just was, that was enough work for that day, I think. Yeah, training went really well.
Yeah, apparently.
How about you,
that for raw deadlift? 360 for a double must be close to what your best is.
Yeah, I think that puts me at a pretty hefty projection, maybe even over 4.
Yeah.
My best raw is 375, so 360 for 2 at like around an 8 is pretty good way to end that block too. Yeah, for sure.
It's a good block when all your lifts are up.
Yeah, it's one of those rare blocks too. I think like it doesn't always come together like that. Yeah. It helps when you like don't push your raw lifts for 2 years and then come back to them when you weigh 15 kilos more and you're like, well, I wonder what I can do.
Maybe I should try that. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go, man. That's the secret sauce, secret strategy.
Cool. Yeah, I don't know. Training here, I was on a pivot here, so it's been pretty low intensity, and basically Mike said kind of just take it pretty easy on lower body stuff, let the adductor issues kind of heal up. So kind of cycling back in the McGill Big 3 every day, doing a few corrective exercises, that kind of stuff. And but everything's starting to feel good. No aches and pains are all starting to go away. Shoulder's starting to feel better. So, 1 more week of pivot here, and hopefully we can get back into some productive training. We'll see. But yeah.
Are you gonna try to get back into some equipment here, or what are your thoughts? Like, obviously this will be proximal to, if not the, I guess not the block for Worlds, but this will be the like 2 blocks out more or less. I'm just assuming your block length, but
I kind of told Mike that I'm going to try to be the responsible lifter and let's take a step back, maybe do some single leg work, try to make myself better a year from now, rather than, as much as the meathead in me wants to throw suit bottoms on and try to squat,
and just
whatever.
Feel like, yeah, my hips will be fine.
Yeah.
My adductors. Yeah.
Like I did that once before, after 2008 Worlds, going into 2009 Arnold's, I could not raw squat without pain. So from, I want to say the bar up, I was in suit bottoms.
Okay.
And I mean, I squat a PR at the Arnold, and then a month later I blew my back out at Nationals. So I'm going to try to, learn from my history,
wow.
which is tough sometimes. But
it's an advanced tactic, I feel like.
Yeah, I'm pretty stubborn sometimes, and I like just think that now will be different. But yeah. So I don't know. We're gonna try to maybe do some corrective stuff and hopefully make me stronger for it.
Good. But good. And you saw the UK, I believe, has pulled out of Classic Worlds as well now.
Yeah, it's And I mean, it makes sense. There's no real answers happening.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I don't blame countries for not wanting to put their lifters at risk, right?
Absolutely.
In the end, if their team goes and everyone comes back, infected, it's not going to look good.
And it just doesn't do anybody any good in any way.
No. Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it makes sense. As much as I'm, an optimist at heart, I'm kind of thinking that 2020 might be the year of no worlds.
Just not really a big meet or like a big meet year. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I would love to go back to Norway. I hope it can happen. I know Marta told us that they'd be making kind of the final decision in June-ish.
Yeah.
So, I guess it won't be more than a couple more weeks before we find that out, I guess, and see what goes from there. But I just, it's so funny though, because like we were talking about Oliver Dahlquist's 400 kilo squat this week.
Awesome.
And like he's in Sweden, right? And they're obviously still training in groups. No one's wearing masks, and
they've kept gyms open in Sweden, from what I know.
As far as
normally they from talking to a few people in our community from Sweden, they've kind of like tiered the approach. So if you are at risk, then you sort of shelter in place, and if not, try to go about your business and be decently smart, I guess. I'm not really privy to exactly the regulations or anything, but as far as I know, gyms have not closed there.
Yeah,
throughout this.
So it's interesting to see the different methodologies being taken about by each country, and kind of what that might mean for international meets this year, really, right?
Yeah. I thought Owen Hubbard posed an interesting question in that, okay, like the US isn't sending a team. The UK is now not sending a team. How many more teams pull out before they cancel it? Or are they going to host Worlds with whatever's left? You know what I mean?
With just Belarus?
Yeah. Or whatever. I mean, I don't know. There's probably some other countries that are maybe proximal that have similar approaches or regulations or lack thereof in regards to the whole outbreak. But you just kind of wonder how that's all going to progress. I don't know if there's been much official word on anything really.
No, because what are the dates on that? August?
I think they moved it to October.
Oh, it's October now.
I want to say October.
Right. Yeah, that sounds right. So, yeah, I mean, you have to assume at some point here they will have to make a decision if they're still going to go ahead with it. Just thinking as a meet organizer, and I assume you're going to have deposits on hotels and hotel rooms, and you're going to have to cut and run at some point before, you can't get your deposits back unless they're already past that point.
It's the championship. Yeah.
Yeah.
So our interview today is going to be with Miss Natalie Hanson. Now, Natalie's been powerlifting since 2012. So she started around the same time that I got into powerlifting, actually. She's done 32 powerlifting meets. 18 of them have been first place finishes, so she's no stranger to being on the podium. She's got a current world record squat of 273.5 kilos. She's got a 619 dots equipped, a 468 dots raw. She's a 3-time IPF world champion and the founder of Corvus Strength Co., where she works with athletes as a coach. She's also done a lot of work in terms of raising awareness and money for suicide prevention in her home state of Alaska. And we get into all of those kinds of things, as well as the strength representation database, which she's working on or partnered with the developers of to try to increase the visibility of women in the sport of powerlifting and in strength sports. So a lot of really fantastic information. We had a great time chatting with Natalie, so we hope you all enjoy the interview, and we'll see you next week. Cool. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast with us, Natalie.
Happy to be here.
You're kind of an equipped lifting icon, so it's cool to have people who've been doing this at a really successful level come on and talk about what they like about it. I mean, I think one of our big goals with the podcast is to get people stoked on equipped lifting, and I think that hopefully you sharing your insights and stuff will help us do that more furtherest.
Yeah, I hope so too.
More to
I don't know that I would I would consider myself an icon. I think I would consider you an equipped icon.
Oh, I don't know about that. I'm just a raw guy who wandered across the street, more or less.
Found himself on the wrong side.
Yeah, wrong side of the tracks, and then decided I didn't want to go back.
It's because your knees hurt too much from the wraps.
It couldn't go back, really. Yeah, everything was numb from the knee down. I didn't know what to do. I was confused and frightened, and here we are, preaching the gospel. So I guess on that note, what crossed the street for you? What brought you across the street? Or did you start equipped, or kind of how was your introduction to equipped lifting? And then like what made you fall in love with it?
So I had kind of a drawn out start to powerlifting. I did CrossFit kind of competitively and really enjoyed it, but I mostly enjoyed the strength focus of some of the various workouts and stuff like that. So I just always found myself gravitating toward that. And a few years into competing in CrossFit, the state chair of Alaska came into our CrossFit gym and was like, who benches 165 pounds? Like, who has a body weight bench? And I was like, that's mine. Like, what's the big deal?
Is that good or something?
Yeah. And he invited me to compete in like the upcoming meet, or that was like a few months later. Sweet. And I was like, yeah, why not? It's like, it's cheap to sign up. And like a few friends were doing it. So I just figured I'd do it. And I still even though I had a really successful experience objectively, I was still not really sold on it. I thought it was kind of boring because I came from a sport where you do kind of everything. And so I did that meet, and then Larry and Priscilla came to our CrossFit gym a few weeks later and taught a really brief kind of seminar, and it was just a few hours, and it was only women, and it was really cool. And they told us just some kind of their stories, and just, if you've ever talked to Larry about powerlifting, he can sell almost anyone on powerlifting. He just the way he talks about it, it's like, oh, this is cool, this is badass. Okay. So I was a little bit more interested after that experience. And then did another meet and qualified for nationals. I set some national junior records at the meet, and still, so I was like, I'll do nationals. Sure, that's fine. And kind of during all of this, I started following Priscilla a little bit closer. And this was 2013. So she was just going to the World Games in Colombia. Okay. And I still at this point, I still had never really watched powerlifting. And so I'm watching the live stream of the World Games in Colombia. And I'm like, what are they wearing? What is this? Okay. And because I still hadn't seen equipment in real life or anywhere. And I see them they look like zombies. Why are these women walking around with their arms sticking out? This is the strangest thing.
Getting hoisted up the stairs.
Yeah, they're getting carried around. And I'm like, okay, I don't know about this stuff. This is strange. But did raw nationals, qualified for the Arnold, and just kind of slowly, this was over the course of about a year, just slowly started getting a little more interested. And then when I qualified for the Arnold, I had sort of been working with Matt Gary for programming. And at that point, I said, Matt, I want you to coach me and I want to do the Arnold. And he was like, well, I need you to drop the CrossFit stuff. You got to stop with that. And I was like, all right, I'm in, I'll do it.
Nice.
So I did it and had I got really strong really quickly, and it was very enjoyable. And still I was just raw. And I can't really remember exactly how, but Priscilla and Larry one time showed up to the gym. This is a couple years later, showed up to the gym with a squat suit they thought would fit me, and literally just put me in it. And nice. Priscilla wrapped my knees, and they put 4 plates on 400 pounds on the bar. And Larry's just very calmly telling me how to squat in the suit. And I did a couple sets, and I was like, all right, cool, thanks. I'm not sure what you expect to happen here. And but that was my first exposure. And it was literally just the three of us. Like I was just doing my workout one day and she showed up. She's like, make sure you wear leggings today. And she just showed up with a squat suit and like put it on me. Okay. And she just annihilated my knees, like annihilated me. I was like swollen
like
and bruised.
100% wrap first time.
Yeah. She was giggling, like she thought it was hilarious. And I like left, like the next morning I woke up and I was like, what in the world happened to me? Like it looked insane. I still don't know if I've ever seen bruises like that on somebody, but I also don't think that people are very often getting like 100% wraps brand new. So, it was always like introduced to me as this is what you kind of strive to graduate to. Like this is the like you build raw strength, you build a baseline, you get your technique dialed in, and then you put gear on. Like that's the next natural step. And just based on my understanding, like there was not really a question about it.
It wasn't like an if, it was a when kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So I was pretty excited when my squat, I think I was squatting like 170 or something like that. And they were like, all right, it's time. And like put me in wraps. And I was training in Texas that summer with like Gene and Ian Bell. And that was my first summer doing any sort of wrapped squatting. And we didn't have any gear around that fit, but they had a bench shirt, like some hand-me-down random bench shirt. Like you couldn't even read the serial number on the tag. Like no one knew where it came from. No one could even really identify what it was. They were like, it's kind of an F6, but it's got like some weird stitching. Like we're not really sure. And I wore that shirt for like 3 weeks and then competed in bench nationals, which was in San Antonio that summer. So it was close by. Okay. And I benched 147.5, I think, something around that.
Okay. So this was like 2015-ish?
2014.
2014.
That was my so I just did a bench nationals because it was down the street to kind of like learn, and then from there I was like, all right, let's do this. Like I did, and then 2015 was my first open nationals, and that's basically the rest is history, I guess.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So there's a few kind of like areas I want to kind of explore in that.
Yeah.
First, so you started training around someone like Priscilla, who, I mean, a legend in the sport, really, like a superstar. She's not been active lately, but especially back in 2013, she was definitely, top of the top, basically. How do you think that starting out around something like that, how do you think that changed your perspective or molded your perspective as a lifter coming into the sport?
Honestly, it wasn't even like I didn't even wrap my mind around like a comparison between who I am and Priscilla. Like it wasn't even on my radar that like I knew that I had some amount of like natural talent because I was always pretty strong and the sport just kind of came naturally to me. But watching Priscilla was like it was just out of this world. Like that's how, and plus not having ever been in equipment, it was even like leagues beyond just like if she was stronger than me without equipment. I was like, then I can't even like, there's no frame of reference really. So it definitely shaped my understanding of like what's possible. But I also was like, she's a freak. Like that's like, I'm not on that level. For quite some time, I was just kind of like, yeah, that's Priscilla. Like she's Priscilla.
Yeah. I think I see this sometimes with, when girls come into the gym and train beside Rhea, where it's like, you have this frame of reference of someone who's lifting so much that like you don't have those self-imposed, holy crap, like 100 kilo bench is a lot, right? Or maybe like a 200 kilo squat is a lot because you have this person that's blowing past it. So then you set your frame of reference totally different to someone who is training with them by themselves or training, with a weaker group of people. And, the old saying of like, always be the weakest person in the gym, that kind of sort of thing. It's interesting to me to see people that come into the sport with such an elite group.
Yeah. She would do even raw. She was she's so strong. Like she would do sets of 8 with 100 kilos on bench, and I hadn't even benched 200 pounds at that point. And I'm just like she would hand me off, and like so it wasn't even, I didn't even feel like a need to like compete with her, or because I couldn't even imagine like.
Yeah.
So do you think that leads into doing your first fully equipped meet in 2015, and then you won Open Worlds in 2017. Mm-hmm. And as someone who's competed in the sport for 15 years, I would say it's a pretty quick turnaround. Mm-hmm. Do you think anything, like you said, you're naturally pretty strong. Do you think there's anything in your athletic past that kind of contributed to this, or do you think there's anything maybe, your training environment that kind of led to this sort of success so quickly?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely like Priscilla having been successful. So while I didn't really compare myself to her, like it helped me understand what was possible. And so in training for my first equipped meet, I'm like unbelievably competitive. And so I wanted to win nationals. Like that was purely what I was like getting ready for. I don't know how I imagined getting there, but that was like, I was competing against, that year it was Leanne Blinn and Jessica, I can't remember her last name.
O'Donnell?
O'Donnell, yeah, O'Donnell. So she had come back after having a couple of kids and did this like kind of comeback meet. So we were kind of the top 3 in the 84s. And I'm just like it at that point. I was like, I know that, because I guess I had seen that I was squatting 500 pounds pretty regularly in training going into Open Nationals. The American record was like in my sights. And yeah, it just, I pulled 200 kilos the first time I put a deadlift suit on. Like I've only added like 15 kilos to my deadlift since then, but at that point I thought that I could pull, I was closing in on a 500 pound pull. So just doing the kind of rough math there, I was like, I could win this thing. And so I think, and I didn't, I got my ass handed to me by Leanne by like 30 something kilos. But I made the team and still was still like, I knew that I hadn't really scratched the surface yet for my potential. So going into 2015 Worlds, I mean, I was kind of dumb too, just like totally like not really considering the implications of like what happens in a competition setting, how you have to manage all these other things. It's not just about like what you're hitting in the gym. But at the time I was just like kind of young and dumb. And I'm like, all right, let's do this quick algebra. Yeah, I'm going to win this.
Based on the gym lifts.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, and that's really all I had to like as a frame of reference. So it works a little better raw to do that, but equipped, it's not quite the same. So 2015 Worlds, I took 4th on body weight. So tied with the Ukrainian who tested positive. She took 3rd, I took 4th. I had an awful day. I think I went 5 for 9 that day, but I don't know. It was quick to get to world championship status in 2017, but it felt like I learned a lot of quick lessons. Like right off the bat, I just went like head first in, fucked up a lot. And, like I had a couple of coaching transitions during that time too, that gave me some bumps in my total, like just the kind of novelty of changing your training style, I think, and getting a little bit like more refined. And then, 2017, it all just kind of came together perfectly.
So I think it's kind of interesting that like going through that quick of a progression up the ranks, like you said, you kind of learned a lot in a short period of time. What were some of those, like, I'm assuming you had some pretty big like aha moments when it comes to things that you learned about yourself in competition or the way that competitions run. What were some of those big moments and sort of how did that impact you as you went through this like very quick rise through things?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one thing that like almost like stopped me in my tracks at my first Open Nationals was coming off of after my 3rd squat, which was a pretty big squat. and being like super excited, and then they're like, get your suit off now, like you have to be on the bench at this, like right now. And I'm like, I'm tired, like give me a second. And they're like, no, like you don't have time. And getting me like on the bench while I'm still like kind of undressing, that experience was somewhat traumatizing.
Okay.
And now that's almost the only thing we know anymore, like competing at open nationals and competing at open worlds, like that's just how every meet is. So learning to be comfortable in that like really uncomfortable situation. It took me a couple meets to get to that point, but that's one thing that I learned. The other piece is managing my body weight. So as I have grown into the 84 kilo class, I've learned that I kind of thrive as a cutter, like cutting into 84. While that may make me really uncomfortable in some of my training sessions where I have to wear my like tighter squat suit and I'm like a full 2 kilos, 3 kilos heavier than I should be in that suit. I just so many times I was walking around at just over 84, and by meet day I'm 82 kilos and everything is loose and I'm bottoming out in my squats and like having an awful experience, which is actually what happened at 2015 Worlds. So that's a big piece of it. So I cut now, like, and I know it's not comfortable and a lot of people would say it's not ideal, but it works for me and I've kind of like figured it out. And then the final piece I think is managing my competitive like headspace. So knowing that, so I had watched by the point that I was competing in equipment, I'd been to a bunch of meets, I'd watched a bunch of lifters, and I just felt like it was like you just have to be hype, like that's just how it goes. And so I would try to like force myself into this like really high energy headspace and crash and burn, and it was just like it was awful, like it was exhausting, I just felt jittery and like crazy, like I couldn't focus on anything. And I figured out that like there's a time and a place for it, right? And like I've figured out how to manage myself in the ups and downs, and that has helped pretty remarkably. So and I manage it in training as well. Like it's not, there's maybe like one lift per week or 2 lifts per week where I have to like be hyped like that. But bench, I'm like put on some like super quiet music. Like I don't want to be like that. But like a third squat and a third deadlift, like basically that's it. If even that, just kind of depending on the circumstance. So those are the main 3 things. And I like to know what's going on too, like with placing. And I like to sit and I like to be able to at least see the colors on the scoreboard. Kind of be able to see lifters, like if they're making and missing. Just I just can't really live in a bubble, and it helps me understand like what I need to do a little bit more to be watching during competition. So those are I think the main things.
Cool. I think that anxiety and arousal component of the picture, I think, is something that takes a lot of lifters maybe a little while to figure out. So you're saying that you kind of have 1 or 2 big, like, let's get fucking hyped for this, and then there's like 2 of those a meet kind of thing or something like that, or
yeah, and it's kind of in my back pocket.
It's not that you need to maintain like a very low level of that kind of stuff. It's that you need to sort of budget that a bit more.
Yep, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So taking a bit of a departure from Natalie the lifter and maybe getting into now Natalie the coach, right? Because you run a coaching company called Corvus, right? So can you tell us a little bit about how that came around or how you got into coaching? And yeah, I guess we can just start with that, because it wasn't always called Corvus either. There was kind of an evolution with the name and the formation of things. So maybe take us through a little bit of that.
Yeah. So I started coaching in an official capacity, like online coaching, offering services in early 2017. So like we launched January 1st of 2017, but I had been a CrossFit coach for years before that. And I actually, like, as people started getting a little bit more interested in, there's a local powerlifting meet, like I want to do it, but I don't know how to prepare. Like I would write someone just like a 4-week block, and it would supplement their CrossFit training. Like it was super low key stuff, but always for free. And just kind of like experimenting, because I was like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to just try to write you something. And they, they're CrossFit athletes. They're always going to like hit PRs because they don't actually know like what they're capable of. So people were successful. And that's kind of how I got I became more comfortable programming for like athletes. And then 2015, 2016, a friend of mine and I started realizing like there are just like no female coaches. Like, where are they? What's the deal here? You'd see like in a conference being announced and it's like a lineup of all dudes. And I'm like, this just doesn't make sense to me. Like at the time, RTS only had male coaches. TSA only has male coaches still, but like the big name companies, it was just kind of like, this isn't making sense to me. And so we decided like, let's instead of just complaining about it and like being salty, let's fix it, because we have the means to like, we have the knowledge and we have the means to like start this little company. And we both, Chelsea and I both worked full time, and we just coached as kind of our side gigs. And it went really well. Like it was really well received. We brought on a couple of coaches and kind of mentored them, and then like set them free to be coaches themselves. And then Chelsea just decided she didn't want to be in the like running a company anymore, because it was kind of like we started putting out apparel, and then people started wanting more apparel, and we were like, all right, this is getting to be a lot. We've got like, a bunch of contractors, and we've got apparel and like all this stuff to manage. And she just kind of was like distancing herself from it. So I took over the full rebrand, like basically just created a new company. And now I do it, and I really don't put out apparel, and I just keep to what I can manage, which is coaching athletes. And so Becky Holcomb, who's an equipped lifter, is a contractor for the coaching company. So she has a bunch of her own athletes. And really the idea was, let's create a company that can hopefully situate female coaches or women coaches to be at the table with the guys, because at the time it felt like the only female coaches who got attention were the ones that were kind of like had a big following from whatever something else, and then decided to start offering coaching. You couldn't just kind of like rise up the ranks as a coach by itself. So I think it's better now. It's not perfect, but but I think that in a lot of ways, powerlifting is like a microcosm of general, like of society as a whole. And so we're seeing more representation just in general. And I think we're seeing more representation in powerlifting as kind of a result of that.
Cool. So where did the name Corvus come from? Corvus
is Latin for raven. And I'm from rural Alaska, where we have lots of ravens. So Sweet. It's kind of so ravens are resilient, and they have really effective communication between them. And it's just like a kind of iconic, I think it's an iconic bird, and represents a lot of what I stand for. So that's Sweet. Kind of the deal. Yeah,
I'm with you on that. I got a big raven.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome. So I know you said you don't do apparel, but you guys do one piece of apparel in particular that I wanted to ask about, and that's a shirt that you guys sell to raise funds for suicide prevention awareness. Can you tell us a little bit about that directive and sort of what brought some of that work in that direction on?
Yeah. So being from rural Alaska, it's very similar to rural Canada, that there's just probably, I'm assuming this about Canada, and I think I'm right, that there's a high suicide rate amongst especially Indigenous populations. So I'm from a town 400 miles west of Anchorage. The town is a hub of 56 villages. So my hometown has like 6,000 or 7,000 people, and then just tribal villages all kind of surrounding, and no roads in or out, very, very isolated. And I can't even like begin to count how many people that I know have committed suicide over the course of my 30 years on this planet. And it's just a huge, huge factor in life in rural Alaska. It's an epidemic. And so it's always really affected me. And I've had a couple of pretty close friends commit suicide. And so when I have a platform, I want to do good things with that platform. And so I think about maybe almost a year ago, I think it was during Suicide Awareness Month, I decided to release this t-shirt. So the Live Your Dreams is this kind of a motto or slogan that was used for a friend of mine who committed suicide. His dad created a foundation, and that's their kind of slogan. And his dad created a foundation and supports he supported me as like in some of my powerlifting travels and endeavors. He supports some friends who are competitive dog mushers. And he just tries to like basically support the young people in the community who are, doing positive things. So I took that, kind of created this t-shirt, and have donated like every dollar to the Alaska branch of the American Suicide Prevention Organization.
That's so awesome.
Where, if you want to drop like a link or a website where people can go to support this?
I think it's, I know what it is. It's corvusstrength.co/merch. And I think it's a highlighted item on the page.
Okay. And I'm going to do my best to put that in the show notes.
Okay.
I think I can do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can do it.
Still learning this stuff.
Yeah, you're good.
No, that's awesome. I think that's really great when you're able to find something like that to connect to, and I mean, use some of the notoriety and some of the visibility to make things like that, or to put some into things like that.
Yeah, thank you.
So kind of coming off of that a little bit in the female representation of coaching, you've also recently launched a strength representation database to increase the visibility of women in the sport. Can you tell us a little about that and kind of the motivation behind starting it and where you kind of want to see it go?
Yeah, so it's not mine.
Okay.
I want it to be neutral. Like that's my focus with it, is like I'm helping push this initial kind of outreach, but I don't want it to be like associated with me necessarily, because I want it to take its own kind of life. That's, as I mentioned, like that's kind of how I got into coaching, was like trying to create more representation in this space. And actually just like maybe a month ago, Pete Spence contacted me and asked if I thought that there would be an interest in a database like this. And I was like, what? How did you know? And he's the technical guy behind it. I couldn't have started this website if I tried. So he built the site, which is, I think it's pretty simple, but I didn't even the idea of putting it in a database hadn't crossed my mind. And so he created the site, and I'm just doing like kind of the initial push. And the goal I have is just to get it populated with enough names and get it like kind of spread around enough that it then just kind of grows on its own. The first push obviously is to populate the database and get all the names in it. And then the second push, of course, is going to get it to be like getting it in front of podcast hosts and like people who do YouTube videos and stuff like that, and like conferences. So like, oh, you're putting on a conference and you have no women in your lineup, like, here, let me help you with that. Like, check out this website. What do you want to learn? So you can filter by area of expertise, by location, by what they're available for. So we've it's not necessarily to find a coach. It could be used as that, but it's more for media and to get just kind of more representation in powerlifting media and strength sports media.
Fantastic. And where I'm assuming that website is up and running at this point?
Yeah, it's strengthrepresentation.com.
Awesome. Yeah. I think we can also try to get that in the show notes. So yeah, anybody listening, lots of things to go and check out and to support, which is awesome. So taking a bit of a detour, or maybe even just a step back in our conversation here, talking about coaching, do you work with a lot of equipped lifters in your current roster, or not really?
No, I think I have had 2 ever.
Okay.
And yeah, I've only ever had 2. I feel pretty equipped to, no pun intended, to handle them, but I just don't think that there's a huge demand.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, it's kind of a bummer because I would like to apply that knowledge and those skills a little bit more, but
Totally.
yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that being said, the 2 that you've worked with, have you worked with them for a long time? Have you had much success, or what's that kind of been like for you?
One was a guy, and
Yeah.
he was not long lived. And then the second one was a very, very strong Icelandic female lifter.
Mhm.
She's Julian's girlfriend.
Oh,
She
okay.
just had a baby, so
Oh, wow. Okay.
we got held up because she got pregnant.
Right. Okay.
So it's not the best idea probably to put a suit on while you've got a bun in the oven. So
I would think not. I mean, I don't know what the science says about that.
So she's just now getting back into the gym, and I
Awesome.
think she'll be ready to go in the next, to compete probably in the next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, so you've got some experience there, and I the question I had for you was in terms of some of the misconceptions that you think, maybe people have about equipped programming because of what they see on social media, right? They just see like a tiny little snapshot of people's training, of people's programming. What do you think are some of the misconceptions that people might have,
Mm-hmm.
and what sorts of lessons or ideas do you think people should maybe focus on instead if they're looking to get started with equipment or equipped programming?
I think one of the questions that I get, and Bryce, you probably get the same question. Actually, you both probably do. Is, do you ever lift raw? And I'm like, literally like 85% of the time. Like,
Yeah.
if you consider I train 4 times a week and I train 52 weeks a year, and I'm only in gear like 14 weeks a year, and it's really only 1 session per week per lift, like if you did the math, like it comes out to very minimally am I lifting in equipment? And I think that is one of these really, really big misconceptions, is that it's just kind of not recognizing that the majority of training is still raw. So I think that's a big piece. I think that we have always kind of advertised, we being like the general equipped lifting community, I think have really instilled this idea that the barrier to entry into equipped lifting is really high. And I don't think it's quite as high as we say it is, or we make it sound like.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that it's not that hard to like my exposure, which happened to be 2 of the like kind of the best people in the sport, exposed me to it. But anyone could have done that. Anyone who had a suit that fit me could have showed up at the gym, put me in this suit and wrapped my knees and said, all right, here's 400 pounds. Like, have you ever tried this before? Like, nope. Like, well, we're going to spot you.
Here we go.
I think that as long as the approach, like the mentality and the approach around like dipping your toes in the water is conservative and reasonable, I think that people could get into it a lot easier. So all it takes is a borrowed suit, a borrowed shirt that fits appropriately, ideally big, like, a few sizes too big, and just like try it for a few sessions to kind of like after your raw training, like after your main lift training, just like put the suit on and just mess around in it. And you don't have to get into a structured equipped prep right away. Yeah. And so I think that's a huge misconception that like I said, the barrier to entry, I don't think is as high as it seems. And I think that more people could just like use equipment for fun in their kind of off season, just to like get exposed to it. And you don't have to spend hundreds of dollars. Like there's like, I've given away so many like old pieces of equipment. Someone's like, can I buy that from you for $50? And I'm like, no, just pay for shipping. Like, I don't I'm not going to use it. Like, just take
Right.
it.
Okay. So anybody who needs stuff,
yeah,
contact Natalie.
yeah, I don't know. So those are, I think, maybe the two major things.
Sweet.
I think it's a really good point, especially like I used to describe like knee wraps and a bench shirt as kind of like the gateway drug. You know, it's a really easy way to get exposed to it, and kind of get your, you know, get the taste of it at least, and the feeling of, you know, even with knee wraps, with a loose wrap, you can probably still get, you know, 30, 40 pounds pretty easily, you know, to get a feeling of, oh, this is cool. You know, I can lift a whole lot more. And a loose bench shirt, you're still going to get some weight out of it. And as long as you're being safe about it, like, I think go at it.
I think too, as ambassadors for equipped powerlifting, like, we have to be responsible in how we introduce someone. So like this kind of is, so instead of giving them 100% wrap, like, give them a light wrap and don't put them in the tightest equipment you can possibly find. Actually, you should actually want them to enjoy it, rather than getting like, you know, like letting your ego get in the way and like deciding to crank on their knees the hardest you've done in a year, just to make a point or whatever it is. I can't even really wrap my mind, but I've seen a lot of people be like, oh, I'm interested, and then somebody kind of takes them in and just like destroys them, and they have an awful experience, and they like, you know, like nearly eat shit multiple times in a session, and they're like, yeah, it's not really for me.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah.
I think there's this like freshy hazing sort of
Yes,
mentality to it, right? Like, we all went through this and now we're going to do it to you too, sort of thing. And oh, isn't it funny that they can't walk because their knees are wrapped so tight, right? I totally get the mentality, and I've probably been guilty of it a few times myself. But I totally agree with, like, you know, start someone else slow and let them have fun with it.
And I think we actually got into that, Natalie, a little bit on that, the one that we did with strength culture, with Eric and Omar. They're talking about how there seems to be a prevailing attitude of, oh, you want to equipped lift, eh? Well, let me show you what it's all about. And
let's see if you can hang, kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And then we go and wrap our knees 40% and get into our loose training suit. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
Yeah, exactly.
So, and I noticed actually earlier a little fella walking through the background on your screen there. You're a dog person, right?
Oh, I thought you were talking about Bryce.
No.
He's not that little.
No, not that little. No.
Yeah, we have 3 dogs.
3 dogs. Okay. Yeah. And have you been a dog person your whole life?
Yeah, I mean, I've had dogs my whole life. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So why are some people crazy and don't have dogs?
I don't know. I can't really imagine. Do they have cats or something?
I don't know.
No, I have no idea. I don't know those people. I don't know people like that.
I can't count the number of times I've had a shitty day and come home and my dog has greeted me at the door, and it's just been the best thing ever. Yeah. And every so often I just wonder how people can not have dogs.
My dogs are pretty out of control. Like, so we have 3, and 2 of them were mine, and then Bryce has a chocolate lab, and mine are insane. Like, I have no control over them. They're very poorly behaved. Like, I'm just one of those. So one is bad because she's like a little demon terrier mix, and no matter what I've done to try to train her, it's like it works the opposite. Like, she's defiant. And so she's nuts. And then the lab mix that I have, he's the white one that we have. He has like some kind of like anxiety, like he probably needs to be medicated for anxiety. So he's just kind of wound up all the time. So I've got like these 2 dogs with like really intense personalities. And then Bryce has his chocolate lab, who's like the most mellow, just like super, super chill dog. And it's a pretty funny combination of personalities. Like, we have like I mean, we can't walk them all together. Like, it just doesn't happen.
Really? Okay.
We've started walking them one at a time, actually. So we get more steps in because we'll just take more walks during the day.
That's fair.
But also because it's like meme worthy if we try to walk all 3 of them. And It's probably a reflection of something about me, about how poorly behaved my dogs are, but I don't really care.
Yeah. As long as you love them, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Have they ever been gym dogs? Has that ever been I'm guessing not your dogs.
I'm opposed to gym dogs. I'm like vehemently opposed.
Okay. Tell us more.
I just think dogs don't know what you're doing. They don't know what weight's on the bar. And how many times have you seen somebody like benching heavy or squatting or something like that, and their dog literally like walks up to them to like get attention? That's fucking terrifying to me. So I've always just been like if you're, so sometimes Priscilla would bring her dog to the gym, but she always kept it on a leash, like tied up.
Yeah.
I'll tolerate that, but like it's too risky. It's true. The dog doesn't know what's going on, and like, what are you gonna do if your dog jumps on the bench while you're benching and you drop the bar on yourself? Like, just seems like not worth it.
Yeah.
I think though, Ryan, you and Rhea's dog seems like an exception to the rule.
Well, so like Kilo
yeah.
started in the gym. We had a private gym, and she was in there when she was 9 weeks old. So she kind of grew up around it, and we've always been very stringent on not on the platform when someone's doing a set. And you know, she's so smart but so stubborn. It's kind of annoying. So like we'll be like, get off the platform, and she'll walk off the platform and like ring around the platform. So like she's not in the way, but she's like, you know, I know I could be in the way.
Yeah.
But yeah, like we're pretty
just one paw on the corner staring at you like,
and like she'll stop dead when we're doing a set. She'll stop and she'll wait for you to do your set, and then she'll keep walking. Yeah. And it's just like, she knows she's not supposed to be, you know, in the way. And so she's pretty good about it. But I definitely have seen far too many videos of dogs or cats sleeping under someone squatting. And I'm like, oh.
Like Mehar's dog, that drives me crazy. He doesn't really do it anymore, but for a while, Mehar was like letting his dog just kind of like roam around in his garage while he trained, and the dog would be like, between his legs. Yeah, just like, I'm like, you're an idiot. I grew up with yellow labs, so I totally the like super mellow demeanor. That's just like, they're really smart, but really just, I don't know, like I kind of understand that personality of them.
Just so bullheaded.
Yeah. They run the place. They know it.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the chocolate lab is so chill, because I had a roommate that had a chocolate lab. That was like the most chill dog I've ever met in my life. And now I'm like, man, I should have got a chocolate lab.
So I did a little bit of a deep dive on your Instagram, and I saw this recurring bicep competition with Eric Helms. Now, I want to know, did you ever officially measure? And if so, how much did you win by?
We never measured.
Okay.
But it was
more of like an aesthetics thing?
Yeah, it was a pose down, and it was around Dublin when we were there for EPC. And he was teaching me how to pose, and then I was attempting to outpose him. Okay. So he would show me the ropes, and then I would be like, all right, watch this, motherfucker. And and that went on and on. But you know whose biceps I did measure was Mike T's.
Oh man. Okay.
I think it was the Columbus airport, and for some reason somebody had a tape measure, and I was like, Mike, you've got
powerlifters have lots of things in their bags.
And I don't know if you guys know, but Mike has guns. And I just looked at his arms, and I was like, Mike, your arms are fucking massive. Can I measure your biceps? And he was just like uncomfortable, but also really flattered, I think.
Yeah. So, that sounds just like Mike, actually.
They were massive. I can't remember how big they were, but I feel like they were like 19 inches or something. Yeah.
He's got huge gorilla arms, like big forearms, giant hands.
Yeah. So I did do that in a public setting, and he was like, like, you know, Mike. So,
half thrilled, half terrified.
Yeah, exactly.
And also taking mental notes, like whether or not he's like the size, density, and quality have improved since the last time he updated his spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly.
On that note, so we've started as of last week, where this process of podcasting is continually evolving for us, and we've started this segment we're going to call Gearhead. And we're going to ask you some specific equipment questions. And if there's anything you don't want to share because it's like some trick of the trade that, is like the Natalie secret, just let us know. We can always edit it out afterwards. But okay, so we're going to dive into what you use and why and what you like and that kind of stuff. So in terms of your squat and deadlift suits, are you stock? Are you custom? And if so, what equipment and sizes do you wear?
Deadlift suit is custom, only because like I would love to have a stock deadlift suit, but the chest, I wear a Velocity, and the chest plate would get, to shorten the straps, the chest plate then gets up too high, and the neck hole is like this big, so I can't fit my ass through it. So so I wear a custom deadlift suit, but it, like the I don't know if you guys know the red, and I have like 2 deadlift suits, and that's basically it. And the red and blue one that has always been awesome for me was stock, and they just shortened the sleeves and then cut the chest plate down. It tightened it. I don't, somehow I or somebody ripped that suit. There's a cut, like a vertical cut in one of the legs, like very clean. And it's like not a legal suit anymore. It's a fucking amazing deadlift suit. So I asked Scott Dobbins one time, like, could I fix this? And he's like, you could, but it would be kind of sketchy. Yeah. So that's a bummer. And then the other one I have is just custom because it's somewhat easier to just send them my measurements. And then I always so I basically just start big and then take them in as it stretches out. My squat suit is stock. And I just take the straps in mostly, sometimes the legs a little bit, but mostly just a strap, like a strap adjustment every, like when I get it, and then maybe one more time. And I wear grippers. Super Cent. So Velocity deadlift suit, Super Centurion squat suit.
So you already kind of covered that you kind of do modifications. What sizes would your stock gear be? We've had specific questions of people want to know what sizes people wear. So
yeah, that's fine. So the obviously the Velocity is custom. I have this kind of, I'm in between on my squat suit. So I have a 38 that I can get into almost just on meet day. If I wear it at any body weight over 84 kilos, I usually have a panic attack during the training session, like a very dramatic panic attack. And
it's like one of those things where you hear stories about people cutting their gear off, and those are the times where you're like, maybe this is happening.
Yeah. Like I'm laying face down on the gym floor, like, get this fucking thing off me. Like Bryce is like he has so he's so patient because he's never experienced what I'm feeling, but he's receptive to it. Like he's not judging me for being like dramatic. He's just like whatever you need, like I'll help you, So that's real. I'm really lucky for that. But the squat suit that I prefer to wear, and this kind of goes against conventional wisdom, is a 40 Super Centurion. It's very comfortable. Like I can, like, basically 86 kilos and below body weight, I can pretty easily pull it on. It's a lot looser than anyone would probably recommend that you wear a suit. But I feel like when I start pushing like the limit on my squat suit tightness, I can't fucking use my leg muscles. Like my legs, I can't get them to work properly. So I swear to God.
That's that nerve cut off thing there.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's not that bad, but I started, 2018 Worlds, I wore a 38, like going into that meet for prep. And then I wore it at the meet. Like my squat was fine, but it doesn't improve at all from a 40. 40 is what I wore for 2017 Worlds, the biggest squat I've ever had. It's also what I wore at the 2018 Arnold, which is when I think I was the strongest I had ever been. I just couldn't hit depth. And then I've worn it. So the only meet I wore that a 38 for was for in Sweden. And I've just stuck with the 40 because I bring the 38 in case I'm like, if I accidentally, like I'm extra skinny or like I just feel small, then I'll put that one on. But I prefer the 40 for sure. And that's like what like 105 kilo men wear, but I don't know.
I don't know. I've never worn anything that small.
Oh, really? Okay.
No.
You're also
No.
not 105, Bryce.
Oh, I was for a long time.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the deal with my squat suit.
You touched a little bit on modifications. Do you do a lot of modifications to your gear? Do you do it yourself? Do you have a seamstress? What's your sort of take on that? And like maybe sort of how do you modify your suits and what do you feel like, you know, we talk to some people and they're like, oh, I like to take in the straps because if I take in the hips, I can't get into position. And my take is the exact opposite of that. But, you know, like what's your take on modifications? What do you do and who does them?
My seamstress is named Bryce Lewis.
Very nice.
You guys might not be surprised by this, but he used to sew his own clothing, like
not
design his own
at all.
shirt. Yeah, I'm not either.
No.
So I was like, I need to learn how to sew. And he's like, well, I know how to sew. I made a leather jacket one time. And I was like, oh, so you could sew gear then. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, it's probably fine. So
Natalie's just like making check marks on the
yeah. So
Perfect.
he sews my gear.
Okay.
I've tried. I'm just awful like with little like refined tasks like that. I can't fucking do them. So he does it. He does a great job. So my deadlift suit, I think I've only ever taken in the hips. Maybe I've taken in the straps a couple of times, but that's not a go-to at all. It's just I cinch in the hips and that cinches the straps down and that's enough. Okay. And then my squat suit, generally just the straps, sometimes the legs. But I did wear a TRX briefly and I think I did the same thing with the TRX, but it seemed easier to do alterations on a TRX than a Super Centurion because of the X, but I don't know. Right. Yeah. We had a really amazing lady in Anchorage that everybody brought their gear to. And she knew exactly, like you would come in and she didn't like look at you cross-eyed. She was just like, all right, what's next? You know, and like was perfect. So, and I took a suit to someone here in Fort Collins when I first moved here and like I like made everything very, very clear. Like, here's what I need, all this kind of stuff. I got it. I put it on. They had just used cotton thread and I like just did one, like stepped into the one leg one time and the whole thing just like blew out the side. And I was like, great. They have no idea what they're looking at either. They're just like, what the hell is this crazy thing? So it was not even worth it. I just bought a sewing machine at that point.
That's fair.
Yeah.
And bench shirt, what do you like to use? How do you modify it, etc.?
I wear a stock F6. Okay. And I just modify the sleeves very minimally. Like, so I wear a stock 40 and I take in the sleeves initially like probably a centimeter. And then probably again, maybe like over the course of a training cycle, it might be like another half a centimeter. But it's just like basically right on inside the previous like seam. I just take it in a little bit more and tighten them up a little bit.
Yeah, I speak for the whole world when I say I appreciate the metric units there. That's good.
Yeah, seriously.
And I think you mentioned knee wraps. Did you?
I wear grippers. Yeah, I have. I can't find anything. So Titan has offered me sponsorships, and I won't wear anything besides grippers. And so I just tell them like, I'm sorry. They've sent me the new THPs and their new, I think they said their new titaniums, like somewhat newly designed. And I have done like a direct comparison. So like I take a single at 250 in titaniums and a single at 250 in grippers, and it's like twice as fast in grippers. And I'm like, I can't justify it. Like and Bryce only enjoys wrapping grippers. So
I've heard he's got a mean wrap.
Yeah, it's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Yeah. So so I use grippers and I probably will never change.
That's right. Grippers are the best.
Just hurts more, makes you move faster because it hurts so much more.
Maybe. if that's what it is, that's fine.
If that's what it takes, eh?
Yeah. So I used a super katana for a few years and my bench had completely plateaued. And so the F6 has obviously worked fine. And a lot of people are like, you'd bench another 20 kilos or more if you put on a super katana. And I'm like, I've tried it. Like, it's not happening. I put one on last fall, and I was like, all right, maybe this is it. Like, I'm gonna wear this. And I unracked 130, and I was like, nope, like, not doing it. Re-racked it. I'm like, I just, the F6 works so much better for me. So
yeah, that's fair. And do you have any idea why that would be? Like, does it allow you to bench more like your raw bench, or like, what do you think is the trick there?
Yeah, I have some theories. So part of the problem with the super katana, I had tried probably like 5 different variations of a custom, not a low cut, like regular collar super katana, over the course of like 2015 to 2017. And I could never get set up right. So my raw bench was like, at the time, was like increasing significantly. And that, I felt like that should, and I'm so new to equipped lifting at that point, like I feel like this should reflect in my equipped progress. And I could never, ever get set up right. And then I could never get my technique right. And I just think that the super katana, with how short my range of motion is, it was just like totally overkill for what I need. And all I need is like a little bit of pop, and it only needs to travel this far. And like, that's what I get out of an F6. So it's just a little springier. I went from, I hit a 15 kilo bench PR after like switching to an F6 after like 2 years of banging my head against a wall in all these different variations of a super katana. And then another like 10 kilo bench PR, and still have just like taken strides forward since then. Yeah. So
that's a sign.
Yeah, I'm not going to mess with it.
If that's not valuable information, then I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So then I think I know the answer to this, but flats or heels for squat?
I wear heels for squat.
Have you ever tried flats, or you played around with that?
Yeah, I fucked myself up really bad in flats. Trying to switch to flats in 2018. I did nationals in heels. I squatted 267 or 270 or something like that in gear. And then I was like, you know what? I think my technique would be like, I had some theories about how I could improve my technique in gear if I switched to flats raw into that, like, so that summer. And I was going to like try flats for basically worlds, and trained in flats for maybe 6 or 8 weeks, and was the most fucked up my back has ever been. Basically starting my Sweden prep, I was like, oh great, this is fun. It was absolutely awful. And I'm pretty sure it was from the flats. Like, I just didn't, there's nothing else that it could have been. And I was in like chronic hip and low back pain, basically, once I started squatting in flats and everything started getting a little bit heavier. And then I switched back to heels and was able to kind of bounce back a little bit, but not very much. So
it's interesting you say that, because I tried the same thing at one point. I was looking at all the big squatters, Blaine and Ray, and they're all squatting in flats. I'm like, well, I guess I should be squatting in flats. So I did it for, I don't even know how long, maybe 8 or 10 weeks or something like that. And I'm like, just my hips ached all the time. Like, I was never not sore in the hips. And then one day I put my heels back on, because I'm like, I just can't do it anymore. And my first like rep with heels, I'm like, oh man, this is amazing. It like felt like I was like just comfortable. So it's so funny.
Yeah. I've never really taken any prolonged trip down that road. I basically got flats before my first, got heels before my first competition. And I think just like have stuck with them. I did some like side-by-side comparisons with a set at like 70% one day and was like, I don't know. So I just kept using my heels. Mm-hmm. All right. Now the last question, this is a contentious topic, and I ask every guest about this, but what is your hot take on reps in gear?
Yeah, I've heard you ask this. I think there can be a benefit of like maybe some triples, but beyond that, you're just wasting your gear. You're ruining it, Bryce. I suppose there's if you have a loose suit, so there's a lot of like nuance to this question though. Like I'm not just going to give you like one soundbite.
Yeah.
I think in a loose suit, and like there's something to gain from doing, like you could probably gain something from maybe 5s in gear.
You heard it here first.
But
Got it.
maybe.
Maybe, but I don't know. Maybe if it's just to like get a bit of overload, like, you're obviously going to use something that you can't do raw, but it's not that heavy. And you're just kind of like greasing the groove, like kind of working some technique. Priscilla and Larry and them, they do like 8s in gear. And it's nasty.
I can't even. As a big proponent of like sets of 5, that sounds terrifying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So they'll wear like super soft wraps, like are they RPMs? Are they Titan?
Yep,
the ones with the
max RPMs?
Yeah. They'll use those and like a decently loose suit, but I'm like, just, I don't know, I would just do it raw or in wraps only or something like that, like at that point. But yeah, so that's where I'm like, I can't really wrap my mind around how that would help. I could see an argument for 5s, but I think more so 3s and below, but ideally like singles.
So, I mean, like from an athlete's perspective, obviously, I much prefer doing singles. But I did find, so as somebody coming to the sport with a raw background, a decent amount of raw strength, and no idea how to use equipment, when I got into my first squat suit, I could get, and even to this day, I can get almost to depth with 75-80% of my equipped mass. So for me, it's exactly that. It's practicing the pattern, it's greasing the groove, it's learning to trust the descent a little bit more. Because by the end of a set of 5, you're thinking, holy shit, I want this to be over with. So you're really trusting the suit and you're really going down quick. And I think that was kind of instrumental. So it's just, and I don't really necessarily have a horse in this race because obviously it's just a tool in the toolbox, but I do like asking because I think it makes for interesting conversations, and it's kind of become a meme at this point. So
yeah.
Thank you for humoring me.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So another thing we do every week is questions from our listeners. So we asked on our Instagram to get a few questions for you. So we'll go through just a couple of those we got that we found interesting. So any raw training that someone could do to prepare in any way for equipped lifting or for trying equipped lifting? I'm not sure where this is kind of going with that, but yeah. Anything you kind of think about that for
like a wide stance high box squat? Just kidding.
Yeah, that's great.
I mean, I guess it depends on like what the purpose would be. So if we want to kind of ease into like feeling, I this isn't something I would do, but just some ideas. If you really want to like feel some overload, like potentially reverse band squats, for example, or something like that. Like I suppose you could make an argument for like a slingshot or a ram bench. But I don't know that there's anything like any true raw training off the top of my head that I think would kind of like get you to that point. But I suppose like adding some wraps, like wrap squats for like to the raw squat, some slingshot or ram bench, deadlift. Deadlifting is just nasty. you just put the suit on. There's no in between. I don't
just put the suit on and pray.
Yeah.
I think if you get some of that voodoo floss and like wrap around your legs as tight as you can,
Super
and then try and squat, I think that's probably your best way to prepare for the
just
feeling
wrap
of squatting.
it from mid thigh up into your
I mean, I suppose like some suit bottoms or something like that if you needed some kind of like modified raw to like ease into it. But yeah.
I think it's funny. There's also, I've had a lot of people come into their first shirted bench session and then be like, this doesn't feel anything like a slingshot. What the hell? Like, this is not what I expected. So you run that risk as well. So also another one that we got from the listeners was in regards to the recent Arnold things. How do you feel, or what are your thoughts on the whole sort of records being wiped from the Arnold? I know it might be a bit of a touchy thing. I know our listeners, I think, know how Ryan and I feel, but
yeah. It's like, well, I'm definitely salty, but it's not anything within my control, so I don't really like waste my time being too wrapped up in it. I think it's very unfortunate when, like, in a circumstance where like this could be worked out between the federations, like lifters are being kind of like brought into it and used as like a pawn in this kind of game. I think that's really messed up, and just potentially sheds some light on where the priorities maybe lie. But I'm a little hesitant to, give like a full,
that's totally fair.
full honest opinion. So yeah, that's really it. It's just kind of like, it's unfortunate, and it's not fair to lifters, but there's not a whole lot we can do, and just hope that USA Powerlifting continues to kind of fight for our lifters and stand up for us.
Yeah. I think the long and short of it is a huge bummer.
Mm-hmm.
They'll only be when will you get, and I think you referred to him as medium Bryce in equipment.
I had this whole scheme yesterday. So during the like aftermath of finding out that USA isn't sending a national team to Classic Worlds, my initial reaction was like, here it is. Here's my chance. Because it's all really
coming together.
It didn't really dawn on me that he was still going to have to do raw nationals to qualify for the team in 2021. So in this, like, I wasn't home when I found out, and so I was like scheming and trying to figure out, okay, so in like a loose suit and knee sleeves and like a loose bench shirt, and I don't know, maybe not even wearing a deadlift suit, like what could he total and could he win open nationals? And like, and so I texted him and I was like, you should do open nationals. And he's like, in August? And then I said, yeah. And he goes, that's kind of close to raw nationals. And I was like, oh, like after I had spent like 15 minutes, like just like, oh man, this is so awesome. Cause I went from like, okay, what could you do at open nationals and like a quick throw this meet together? Like, what could he put up?
Mm-hmm.
And then if he had like another, 10 weeks or 12 weeks to train for open worlds, like then that's like big time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all kind of a sad realization when I recognized that he had to do classic or raw nationals. I did gift him a deadlift suit one time.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a Fusion. And it was one that I had gotten for myself, and I absolutely hated it. And so I was like, I think this will fit you, and I gave it to him. It was before I lived here. I sent it to him as like a gift. I think it was for winning 2017 Raw Nationals. I was like, here's your like, prize. And he put it on in the gym and proceeded to like do like, so he when you put the straps up and you can like bend over and it holds you up, like that kind of position, he laughed hysterically for like a half an hour standing in that position, like at how ridiculous it was. It was way too small for him, it turned out. So he couldn't even, like, he got to the bar with like 405, like 4 plates on the bar, and like did the most like sketchy question mark back deadlift ever, and then was like, all right, I'm done, like took it off. And I think that suit is still in the back of his car, just like begging for him to put it on. But he has very little tolerance for like pain and like that kind of like physical like pressure that we feel and the sensation. I don't know that it will ever happen.
Yeah, I think we've had that discussion before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately.
I'd like to see him in a bench shirt though.
He'd have to widen his grip. He probably would refuse to widen his grip.
Just give him an F6, then he can bench however he wants, right?
Yeah. Like I've never even seen him put a slingshot on, or
I don't think I've ever seen that either.
Yeah. Too bad.
So another one is, I think everybody's seen that, Colorado's starting to loosen some of their restrictions, and you guys are able to get back into the gym, which is awesome. I'm happy to see that. How terrible is it to train with a mask on? What is that sensation like? And do you notice it much, or is it just kind of like, I'm just happy to be here?
It's less terrible than training in my garage by myself.
Yeah.
So
Perspective.
I'm not an at-home, like I don't love training in my garage at home or anything. Like I never have.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty like rough. I mean, I don't want to complain about like having a full fucking gym of like setup of equipment in my garage, but like I don't love it. And so
I think that's
I would rather train in
uncommon.
a mask. Yeah, I would rather train in a mask in the gym with 4 people than in my garage without a mask. It's not that bad. I was just actually Bryce did a Instagram live today, and we were just kind of talking to people, and it's like there are a couple of moments over the course of a 2-hour training session where I think to myself, like, this is really uncomfortable for like a split second when I'm like breathing heavy, and then I catch my breath and I'm like, oh, everything's fine. So
yeah,
it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
And it turns out Colorado, I think that the county that we live in is going to make masks just recommended starting like next week, but the city of Fort Collins is going to continue to require masks. So
okay.
We'll still have masks on for a while.
So the final segment we have here for you are common questions, and these are things that we kind of ask all of our guests. It's a series of questions that we think kind of gives our listeners maybe the best slice of some information or some takeaway. So for you, Natalie, what is the highlight of your lifting career thus far?
I think, well, if you had asked me this like a year ago, I would have said 2017 Open Worlds. But I think since then, I've had some performances that like where I like knocked my own socks off.
Yeah.
That like I didn't that obviously weren't, they were both bench only, but like just kind of like, I don't know, surprised myself. And so I think for powerlifting, if we're talking like performance where it all just kind of comes together so like perfectly, and that would definitely be 2017 Open Worlds. But I also didn't have like, I didn't really have competition that day. I think I won by 30 kilos or something like that. So it's easy for a day to come together perfectly. I mean, it's not easy, but that's the chances of it happening are more likely when you're 30 kilos up. And there's like lower stakes, I guess. It's not low stakes, but relatively speaking. But Tokyo was insane. That performance, I had no idea that I had that in me. All I knew going into it was if I bench the world record, I'll probably win. And I benched 192 at Open Nationals 2 weeks prior, and it was like very, very hard. And so I hadn't done like a competitive bench only in that way, like where we're like very serious about attempts. And so I didn't really know what we were doing, besides that they told me I should plan to open heavy enough that it's competitive, but it should also be like kind of teetering on the line of like, basically what's the heaviest I think I'm comfortable with.
Right.
And I was like, I think it was 185. And I was like, I guess it's 185, and basically just get my opener and go from there. And to pull off that 202, like I had only benched like, 192 was like the heaviest bench I'd hit that whole like training leading up to that meet. And so that was pretty wild. And then to do that kind of again at the Arnold, but for the Arnold, I had only done, the heaviest I'd gone was 200 to a one board.
Okay.
And I was like fucking loaded. Like I'm not playing around. Like I'm here to win money, and I'm here for this world record.
Yeah.
And they were like, okay, crazy. Like, they're just like, because I just feel like I don't know, with a bench shirt, like there's so much, their ceiling is so high if you have good technique. And to have pulled that off was like, yeah, it was just, I didn't really, I believed in my ability. And I said, when I signed up for the Arnold, I told my coach, like, I want to bench 213. And he probably was like, I don't know what you're smoking, but okay, like that kind of thing. And yeah, I mean, I did it after only handling 200. I think I handled 200 twice in training, and it was both to like a one board. And I was like, I cut pretty hard for it too. So I don't know. Benching is awesome. Benching is really fun.
I'm feeling the same way right now.
Yeah. So I think I would say that those are kind of the three that sum up like what's been really awesome. And yeah, I mean, I'm looking for my next kind of like 2017 Open Worlds being like that I'm healthy now. Like things are feeling good. So
like as a counterpoint to that, what would you identify as like maybe the lowest point of your lifting career? And what did you learn from that?
Okay. So Sweden in 2018 was pretty awful. Because I think part of it was that I went in knowing that I wasn't like in good shape. Basically, I was pretty messed up, and it was not enjoyable. Like I won worlds, but I felt like I didn't deserve it. Like I shouldn't have won, and it just was hard. It was just hard because it wasn't fun. But I knew that wasn't like the end of it. I was just kind of like, I know this is just a low point and like we're going to come back. And I did everything right between 2018 and 2019 Worlds, like, you know, stayed healthy, like just tried to train as intelligently as possible. And 2019 basically like June on, like, so nationals, I was pretty okay physically, but June on, I had some fucking weird thing going on with my glute and was in pain basically 24/7 and could barely walk. Like I could barely walk like a mile without having like excruciating pain in my glute, like a total spasm in my glute, pain down my leg, calf cramping, like just nasty. And like twice a week physical therapy, just to be able to like get the bare minimum done. And sometimes not even that. And I would have training sessions where I was in tears, like because I couldn't even physically like do the work that I needed to do. In September of 2019, I just said, like, I'm either not going to make it to Dubai or I have to make a change right like now. And I made this call 12 weeks out, switched coaches, hired a new coach, and basically said, like, I'm going. I'm making that, like, at that point I said, like, okay, well, I'm making the decision that I'm going, and I just need to be like in the as good as we can get between now and then. So it was pretty rough. Like just, I mean, the whole, but I would say basically until like the last three weeks or so. I almost like basically until, so we got to Dubai like 2 full weeks early. And I would say like the only pain-free sessions I had were the last 2 sessions I had in Dubai. And it was miserable, like not, and it started, like I started having these thoughts of like, how do you know when your peak performance is gone and you've already hit it, and you're just kind of like on this downward like trend, and will I ever know, like, will I know when that point is happening, and is it now? Like maybe my body, like maybe I just can't do this, like maybe my body can't handle it. And so just like all these really like negative, like depressing thoughts. Obviously like I didn't have an awful day in Dubai, but I didn't have this same like kind of spark that I often have, or that I like to have when I compete. But since then, I, knock on wood, am probably the healthiest I've been since like maybe mid 2017. So I'm just like, but now I'm so thankful for like every single training day that I have, that I'm like, that I'm performing what I, hitting what I need to hit, feeling good, like enjoying myself, that it's like the other stuff is like less important at this point, because I've hit that bottom. I feel like that was my like bottom point, was like the last half of last year. And now I'm just kind of like trying to slowly, carefully climb back up. But yeah, so I would say like, it's not a point. It's just like this kind of cumulative time that I was just like pretty fucked up.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I know as someone who, like, I've had a lot of injuries and like a really long-term back injury, and so often I'll cut down my training, like, all right, I'm going to shut it down, like things are feeling good, but I don't want to push it. And I take a lot of flack for, my RP8 sets not being anywhere near RP8, but I think the appreciation for pain-free training, it's really hard to appreciate. Without having experienced that sort of, where you can't even get through a workout without feeling like you want to quit. That I think that really resonates with me.
Yeah, for sure. I think like the first time you get to a workout where you're limited because of the weight on the bar and your strength, as opposed to how much it hurts and needing to stay shy of a certain point, is like glorious.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. So it's been really, really fun. Like basically this year so far. And so I'm still working with that new coach that I hired, Nathan Westbrook, and he like, so he watches my training every week and programs the next week based on my performance. He's like literally only putting the weight on the bar that's like the right call. It's never just like, oh, this is the progression we follow. Like no matter, it's always super, super intentional. And I think it's helped me a lot, just kind of relax about like my mentality about training, knowing that it's not just because this is the next percentage increment and this is what this is how we've always done it for you kind of thing. It's really like, all right, I think you're good for 3 triples at 170 instead of let's just bump up 2%.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been good.
It's interesting to see that kind of sentiment echo some of what we heard from Marta in terms of how she's sort of restructured her training. She's now healthier and happier. And I think a lot of it comes down to just auto-regulation rather, and individualizing the program and those kinds of things. It's cool to hear. So who have been some of your biggest inspirations? And it doesn't need to be powerlifters necessarily. It can be kind of from anything.
I don't know. I really, really, so anyone that seems to exude like just kind of grit and work ethic and just like grinding out years of training without, just kind of unrelenting work ethic. And so I don't know that I have like names off the top of my head, but just that mentality and that kind of a dedication to something is what I've always like in everything in my life. I've always strived for and been like inspired by. So it's less about high performance and accolades and achievements, and more just about like how much will you dig in and continue like pushing forward in whatever way you can when it's tough.
Yeah.
What would be one piece of advice you wish you could give yourself when you were just starting out?
To slow the fuck down. I think that like we just went in kind of deep on injuries. I think that I could have avoided a lot of just frustration and struggle and kind of like these big swings if I had just kind of like slowed my roll a little bit, and understood that I don't know. My coach for several years was pretty aggressive. Sorry, that's my dog's.
That's okay. I wondered if it was mine for a second.
I was wondering if it was Ryan's too.
Pretty aggressive in his programming. And and so it just eventually took its toll. So obviously I had this quick, should I hold on?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Uh-oh, I got a lawnmower.
This like this fast rise, but then it bites you in the ass.
So other than, are we calling him medium Bryce now?
Yeah, well, we can't be calling him small Bryce. He's 105 kilos. Like, he's not small.
No. I don't even see the need to like have a size descriptor, but it seems to be the going rate.
He doesn't like it.
Other than Bryce Lewis, who's one raw lifter you'd love to see get into equipment?
Maybe Jen Milliken.
Okay. All right.
So Jen Milliken, she really like exudes that character that I was talking about, that like is Absolutely. Comfortable in the uncomfortable. And I think that and she's got like really solid technique and very consistent technique. And I think she could do really well in gear. So that's I think who I would name.
Sweet.
All right, and our last question is: do you have any concrete goals that you're aiming for right now?
It's hard to have concrete goals when we don't even know like when and if we're gonna have meets.
For sure.
So I would say, like, obviously Open Nationals if it happens, win Open Nationals if it happens, Open Worlds if it happens, if we get to go, if USA sends a team, win Open Worlds if USA sends a team. Just kind of, I mean, it's just the same. I feel like it's the same cycle. I think that as long as I can stay healthy, I think that I've got a big squat in me in the next, I think it's 12 weeks at this point till Open Nationals. So I think I've got a big squat in me, and I think I feel like I'm knocking on the door of a 500-pound bench. So sometime we get there.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, so if people wanted to reach out or find you, where could they go on the internet to access yourself or some of the resources that you're creating, all that kind of stuff?
So my personal Instagram is natalie.907.
Okay.
My business Instagram is Corvus Strength Co. That's it. Website is corvusstrength.co.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time. I know this has gone on to be a bit of a long conversation, but I think it's been pretty awesome. So thank you for joining us, and yeah, I guess we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
All right. We want to thank you for listening to the Equipped, Bruised, and Tired podcast. We're going to be available on iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, wherever fine podcasts are found. So make sure to leave your 5-star rating if you enjoyed the show, and a review as well, and or check out our video version of the show on our YouTube channel. If you have any questions for ourselves, guest suggestions, or questions for our guests, you can go ahead and contact us at equippedbruisedtired@gmail.com, and make sure to do your part to spread the word of the Equipped Renaissance. We'll see you next time.